The atmosphere buzzed with excitement as the rehearsal dinner for my daughter Marissa's wedding began to unfold. I observed with a sense of fulfillment as she stood next to her fiancé, Kevin, soaking in the warmth of heartfelt congratulations from our loved ones. Unbeknownst to me, the cheerful ambiance of the evening was on the brink of being disrupted by the one individual I had endeavored to welcome into my life. "Could I kindly ask for everyone's attention, please?" Marissa's voice echoed, commanding the attention of everyone present. My husband, Ron, and I shared a confused look as she lifted her glass. "I want to take this moment to address the elephant in the room," she proclaimed, her gaze locking onto me with a chilling intensity. "Elise, you might refer to yourself as my stepmother, but the reality is that you are merely an unwelcome presence in my life." Gasps reverberated among the astonished guests as Ron's complexion faded to a ghostly hue. It was as if a heavy blow had landed, leaving me breathless and reeling from the sting of her harsh words. "Marissa, can you explain what this is all about?" Ron demanded, his voice quaking with disbelief. "Don't act so surprised, Dad," she retorted with a sneer. "This woman has been attempting to ingratiate herself into our family from the very beginning. I've reached the end of my charade. She's not my mother and she never will be." The sharpness of her words cut through me like a blade. I frantically scanned her face for any hint of the kind, affectionate girl I once knew, but all I saw was disdain and animosity glaring back at me. "Marissa, I beg you, let's not have this conversation here," I implored, my voice trembling with feeling. "Why not indeed?" she exclaimed fiercely. "This is my day, and I will express myself however I choose." Ron's fists tightened at his sides, fighting to keep his calm. "That's enough," he cautioned, his jaw locked in determination. "We are departing now." Marissa simply shrugged, a cruel smile playing on her lips as she turned away from us, leaving me to confront the judgmental stares and whispers of our shocked guests. As we walked toward the exit, I felt the intensity of their gazes piercing through me, wondering what kind of monster I must be to evoke such animosity in my own stepdaughter. The tears I had been suppressing finally cascaded down my cheeks, and in that instant, I realized that nothing would ever return to normal. Ron's knuckles were white as he gripped the steering wheel, his face a canvas of fury and anguish. "I don't know what's gotten into her, Elise," he said, his voice strained, "but I promise you I won't let her get away with this." I nodded in silence, feeling too overwhelmed to find the words. As we drove away, leaving behind the smoldering ruins of what should have been a joyous occasion, I found myself pondering the fate of the bright loving girl I once knew. And more crucially, what convoluted journey awaited our family following her shocking betrayal. The precise moment when Marissa's resentment towards me began is difficult to identify. It might have started the moment I wed her father, Ron, thus taking on the role of her stepmother. Or perhaps the groundwork was laid long before, instigated by her cunning mother, Clara. "There's no need to be concerned, darling," Clara had whispered softly, her perfectly manicured nails gliding through Marissa's hair. "Your true mother is irreplaceable." Even then, her words lingered uncomfortably, yet I set those feelings aside, resolute in my desire to cultivate a nurturing relationship with my new stepdaughter. I reassured Marissa softly, expressing that I had no intention of replacing anyone. "I simply wish for us to be friends." She nodded, yet her empty gaze revealed a lack of warmth or affection. It felt like a barrier had been constructed, strengthened by her mother's toxic murmurs. In those early days, Marissa was polite, though somewhat aloof. Yet, as time went on, her mask started to fall apart, exposing the profound resentment that had been brewing just below the surface. "Why are you always trying to intrude into my life?" she snapped one evening. As I innocently asked about her weekend plans, Ron cast her a disapproving glance. "Marissa, please refrain from addressing your mother in that manner." "She's not my mother," Marissa erupted, her expression twisted with fury. "And I'm tired of her pretending to be one." With that, she stormed off, leaving me shaken by the bitterness in her words. Ron shook his head, his face reflecting a blend of disappointment and resignation. From that moment on, Marissa's contempt for me became increasingly apparent. She would cast a dismissive glance my way whenever I stepped into a room. muttering sarcastic comments just loud enough for me to hear. Basic requests or offers of assistance were met with sharp retorts, as though my mere presence was an insult to her being. "You're not fooling anyone with your fake concern," she scoffed one day after I offered her a ride to her friend's house. "Marissa, that's enough," Ron cautioned, his patience running out. Yet, his desperate cries went unheard. It quickly became evident that Clara was the catalyst for Marissa's growing resentment. Whenever we encountered each other, her sweet smile hardly masked her pleasure in our tumultuous connection. "I can't fathom what you've done to sway my daughter against you," she would coo, her eyes sparkling with spite. "But I guess you'll have to bear the repercussions." And live with them I did, as Marissa's animosity grew like a festering sore, tainting our family dynamic with every single day. Unbeknownst to me, her blatant indifference to my emotions was just the beginning of a much darker reality, one from which escape seemed impossible. After Marissa left college, her slide into deceit and wickedness intensified. Lacking direction and purpose, she appeared resolute in her mission to turn our lives upside down. Wielding her complaints as tools to extract money and create turmoil within our family. "Hand over $5,000, or I'll expose the truth about what a terrible stepmother you are," she spat one day, trapping me in the kitchen. I pulled back in disbelief. "Marissa, where is this coming from? I've tried my best to be good to you." "Save it," she retorted sharply. "Just give me the money and I'll leave you alone for a while." A sense of urgency gripped my heart as I confronted the extent of her wickedness. I don't have that kind of cash on hand." Her gaze sharpened, turning into a piercing glare. "Then I recommend you locate it, unless you wish to see your esteemed reputation tarnished." From that moment forward, it turned into a habitual practice. Marissa would insist on ever larger amounts, her threats becoming more grotesque and erratic with each denial. Ron found himself trapped in the middle, frantically attempting to appease both of us while grappling with his daughter's sudden decline. "Please, just give her what she wants," he pleaded with me one night after yet another explosive clash. "I can't stand all this fighting." Yet, I understood that yielding would only empower her more, so I maintained my position, even as Marissa's methods became increasingly devious. "You believe you're so superior, with your ideal job at the high school," she mocked. "Just wait until everyone finds out what a fraud you really are." The implied threat sent a shiver down my spine. I could only envision the cruel fabrications she could unleash, tainting the perceptions of my colleagues and the students I had pledged to support and safeguard. Throughout it all, Clara lingered, her sinister smile a quiet approval of her daughter's distorted actions. "You reap what you sow, Elise," she mocked during one of her regular, unwelcome appearances. "Perhaps, if you had embraced your role as a stepmother more fully, Marissa wouldn't be behaving this way." Her words cut deep, igniting a storm of feelings that threatened to overwhelm me. Rage, pain, and a sense of betrayal intertwined, creating a suffocating mix that left me feeling lost and powerless. Yet, amidst the chaos of the storm, a small spark of determination ignited within me. I refused to remain a mere bystander in my own existence. If Marissa sought conflict, then conflict she would have. The moment had arrived to stand firm, to unveil her as the cunning, heartless being she had transformed into. If Clara believed she could persist in orchestrating events from the darkness, she was sorely mistaken. The era of cordiality had come to an end. From that moment on, I promised myself to do whatever was necessary to safeguard my family, even if it required actions I had never envisioned. As Marissa's wedding day approached, her demands and disrespect escalated to astonishing levels. It felt as though she derived a twisted satisfaction from tormenting me, testing the limits of my patience until I stood on the brink of a breakdown. "I require an additional $3,000 for my dress alterations," she declared one evening, skipping any form of greeting as she strode into the living room. Ron cast a desperate glance my way. Yet I had hit my breaking point. "No, Marissa, enough is enough." Her eyes widened in feigned astonishment. "Oh, what will you do about it, Elise? Call out to Daddy as you usually do?" My hands clenched tightly at my sides, anger surging through me. "You ungrateful brat, everything your father and I have done we've done for you. And this is how you repay us?" Marissa tossed her head back and laughed, the sound scraping against my nerves like nails on a chalkboard. Oh, come on, don't pretend to be so superior. We both know you're just a pathetic, insecure woman trying to buy her way into our family. That cut deeper than I wanted to acknowledge. But before I could gather my thoughts, she struck with her final words. Do you honestly believe the school would want someone like you? A complete failure. Near their students? Just wait until they find out about your drinking issues. My heart sank as I grasped the extent of her cruelty. She intended to unleash malicious falsehoods to obliterate my career and tarnish my reputation in an instant. Marissa, that's enough, Ron shouted, his face red with anger. Yet she simply smirked, delighting in the turmoil she had created. At that instant, a transformation occurred within me. A firm determination gripped me, fortifying my spirit against the flood of feelings that sought to overwhelm me. I would reclaim my power, no longer subdued by her devious tactics and control. Get out, I said, my voice low and dangerous. And don't come back until you're ready to start acting like a decent human being. Marissa's eyes widened, surprised by my sudden defiance. But then her lips curled into a sneer as she leaned in close. Her breath hot against my face. You'll regret this, Elise, I promise you that. With those final words, she pivoted sharply and exited, creating a heavy silence behind her. Ron watched her leave, his face reflecting a blend of disbelief and sadness. I'm sorry, Elise, I can't quite understand what's come over her, he said softly, massaging his temples with a hint of concern. Yet, I was aware of the truth. This transformation did not occur overnight. The moment arrived, a result of years steeped in resentment and manipulation, all meticulously crafted by Clara's toxic presence. As I revisited Marissa's cruel threats in my thoughts, a steely resolve began to form inside me. She believed she could shatter my existence on a mere impulse, wielding her toxic fabrications as tools to dismantle me. Indeed, she was profoundly misled. If a battle was what she sought, then a battle was what she would have. This time, I was determined to forge my own path, unbound by her expectations. The harshness of Marissa's threats lingered in my thoughts, igniting a fierce resolve to reveal her real character before time ran out. I realized that counting on Ron for support was not an option. His love for his daughter clouded his vision, preventing him from recognizing the monster she had turned into. No, if I wanted to safeguard myself and our family, I would need to take control of the situation. That's when Derek made his entrance. Once, he had been Marissa's boyfriend, back when she was still untouched by manipulation and greed. A serendipitous meeting at the grocery store sparked an unexpected dialogue. And gradually, the truth started to unravel. She's not who you think she is, Derek revealed, his gaze heavy with regret. The things she told me about you and Ron, they were all lies. My blood ran cold as he recounted tale after tale of Marissa's deceit, how she had painted me as an overbearing, controlling stepmother, desperate to wedge myself into their tight-knit family, how she had claimed Ron was an abusive tyrant, lording his power over them with an iron fist. I believed every word Derek admitted, shame coloring his cheeks. She was so convincing, so full of anger and resentment. It was only after our separation that the reality began to unfold. As he shared his thoughts, the true nature of Marissa's deceit came into focus. Her intricate web of falsehoods, meticulously designed to pit others against me, had been woven over many years. At the heart of the turmoil stood her mother, Clara, orchestrating everything with the finesse of a master puppeteer. She's been poisoning Marissa's mind against you since the beginning, Derek disclosed, implanting all manner of distorted thoughts about your intentions to usurp her mother. A surge of nausea welled up as the fragments fell into alignment. I had unwittingly become the focus of their malicious scheme, painted as the antagonist in their warped story. However, Derek's insights didn't stop at that point. He continued to unveil Marissa's genuine intentions behind her forthcoming wedding, a shrewd, strategic pursuit of riches and prestige. She has no feelings for Kevin, he derided. She's merely leveraging him as a means to the life she believes she is entitled to. Once she secures her grip, she'll drain him completely and move on to the next unsuspecting victim. A chill coursed through me at the nonchalant malice in his tone. It had always been a lingering thought in my mind that Marissa's feelings lacked depth. Yet hearing the stark reality was undeniably difficult to accept. As Derek and I went our separate ways, my thoughts were swirling with the insights he had revealed. For far too long, I had remained a passive observer, letting Marissa and Clara shape the story. With the truth in my possession, I was certain of my next steps. It was time to confront them, to dismantle their meticulously crafted facades and reveal the distorted truth lurking underneath. No longer will I play the victim, nor will I cower in fear of their threats and deceit. From that moment forward, the gloves were off, and when the dust finally settled, there would be no question about who the true villain was. The morning of Marissa's wedding arrived with a radiant sky, yet the air within the church was heavy with unease, as I observed her fuss and adjust in front of the mirror. A chilling resolve enveloped me. This would be the day when the reality was ultimately revealed. "You look stunning, darling," Clara said softly, fixing Marissa's veil with a sweet smile, just like royalty on her momentous occasion. Marissa glowed, soaking in her mother's compliments like a flower reaching for sunlight. The view twisted my insides. "Indeed, a genuine fairy tale," I chimed in, unable to hold back the jab. "Featuring a dashing prince and a malevolent stepmother." Clara's gaze sharpened, yet Marissa just chuckled, seemingly unaware or indifferent to the weight of my statement. With a hint of sarcasm, she remarked, "I'm quite surprised you decided to grace us with your presence, Elise. Given how you've been treating me, I almost anticipated you would completely withdraw from the situation." A harsh laugh slipped from my mouth. "Oh, trust me, I considered it, but I wouldn't trade this experience for anything." Before she had a chance to reply, Ron peeked into the room. A forced smile stretched across his face. "Is everything all right in here?" "Everything's just perfect, Dad," Marissa said with a sweet smile. Elise and I were sharing a sincere moment together. The sarcasm in her tone was unmistakable, yet Ron appeared resolute in his decision to overlook it. "Indeed, the moment is nearly upon us. Are you prepared, my young friend?" Marissa nodded, her expression transforming into one of sheer anticipation as she readied herself for her moment in the spotlight. With the music rising and the doors parting, I inhaled deeply, bracing myself for the unfolding moment ahead. The ceremony unfolded in a haze. A meticulously orchestrated performance of empty promises and insincere gestures. As Kevin and Marissa leaned in to share a kiss, I sensed the moment had come to make my move. "Halt," I called out, my voice echoing in the quiet chapel. "This ceremony cannot move forward." A wave of astonishment swept over the crowd, their gazes locking onto me in unison. Marissa's face twisted with rage, her hands clenched into tight fists at her sides. "What does this signify?" She spat the words, her voice quaking with suppressed fury. Drawing in a deep breath, I locked eyes with her, my expression unwavering. "The essence, Marissa, is that I can no longer remain passive while you persist in deceiving and controlling those in your vicinity." Clara's complexion drained, understanding flickering in her gaze. Yet, before she could step in, I continued, revealing the incriminating evidence Derek had shared, a trove of texts, emails, and recordings that exposed Marissa's intricate web of lies. "For years, you've woven a complex tapestry of deceit, turning everyone against me while portraying yourself as the blameless victim," I declared, my voice resonating with certainty. "Indeed, that is no longer the case. The moment has arrived for the truth to be revealed." As I carefully presented the evidence of her betrayal, outlining her devious plans and self-serving intentions, a hushed stillness enveloped the chapel. Marissa's facade shattered, her expression contorting into a hideous grimace of fury and incredulity. You deceitful person," she hissed, charging at me with outstretched, talon-like fingers. "How could you possibly think to tarnish my special day?" However, the moment had passed. The harm was irreversible, the reality exposed for everyone to witness. As Kevin's family shrank back in disbelief, their faces reflecting the shock and betrayal coursing through the crowd, it became evident that Marissa's meticulously built facade was collapsing around her. In that moment, as she stood solitary and vulnerable, a distorted remnant of the girl she had once been, I experienced an unusual blend of compassion and victory. The battle had come to an end, and I stood triumphant, not through manipulation or deceit, but by illuminating the harsh reality that had been lurking in the darkness for far too long. The consequences of my shocking disclosure felt like an explosion, breaking apart the fantasies we had all been trapped in for far too long. As the shocked quiet transformed into a whirlwind of cries and breaths, I braced myself for the forthcoming clash. "How could you?" Marissa seethed, her expression contorted into a grotesque visage of fury. "This was supposed to be my perfect day." "Your perfect day was built on a foundation of lies," I retorted, my voice unwavering despite the storm brewing inside me. "Did you truly believe you could keep deceiving everyone indefinitely?" She parted her lips to reply. Yet the words faded away as Kevin advanced, his face a blend of shock and sorrow. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice rough, his eyes searching hers for a denial of the incriminating truth I had exposed. "Were you simply taking advantage of me all this time?" For a fleeting instant, I nearly felt a pang of sympathy for her. Nearly. Then that well-known sneer curled her lips, and I caught the glimmer of cold calculation in her eyes. "Of course not, darling," she whispered, gently stroking his cheek. "You are aware of the depth of my affection for you. Elise is simply trying to create chaos, as she always does." My nails pressed into my palms as I battled the impulse to wipe that insincere expression right off her face. Wasn't she aware that the end was near? It seemed she had no intention of letting go, as her piercing gaze returned to me with a fierce intensity. "This is all your fault," she spat. "If you had just left well enough alone, none of this would be happening." "Enough," the booming voice rang out, startling us all. I turned to see Ron, his face flushed with anger and shame. "I can hardly fathom what I'm hearing," he remarked, shaking his head slowly. "My own daughter, deceiving and controlling those around her for her own selfish purposes." Marissa's lips moved in silence, yet no response emerged. For a moment, she appeared speechless, confronted by her father's clear disappointment. "I don't know you anymore," Ron continued, his voice heavy with feeling. "The cherished, affectionate girl I nurtured, she's vanished. Hasn't she?" An uncomfortable stillness enveloped the room as we observed the dawning comprehension settle in, affecting not only Marissa but Clara too. The women exchanged glances, an unspoken clash of determination unfolding between them. At last, Clara found her voice. "Well," she snapped, her gaze piercing through her daughter. "Aren't you going to say something? Defend yourself?" But Marissa stayed silent, her shoulders drooping towards her feet. In that moment, she appeared more diminutive than I had ever witnessed, a mere shadow of the entitled, manipulative person she had transformed into. Clara turned on her heel with a disgusted snort and stormed out, leaving a stunned silence behind her. One by one, Kevin's family mirrored his actions, their faces displaying a spectrum of emotions from sympathy to sheer disgust. And just like that, it came to an end. The magnificent scene Marissa had meticulously crafted now lay in tatters around her, the broken fragments of her distorted aspirations. As Kevin dashed away from the church, his expression twisted in torment. A wave of regret washed over me. He was merely a casualty in Marissa's elaborate scheme, an unsuspecting piece to be manipulated and cast aside at her discretion. Yet the regret was swiftly eclipsed by a feeling of dark contentment. The reality was exposed, revealed for everyone to witness. There would be no more deceit, no more schemes, only the bitter flavor of karma and the stark truth that Marissa had invited this reckoning upon herself. The aftermath of the calamitous non-wedding unfolded in a tempest of turmoil and reflection. As news of Marissa's betrayal circulated rapidly, she became more and more alone, an outcast in the very community she had once aspired to dominate. The expression on her face remains etched in my memory as she arrived at her mother's doorstep, yearning for a lifeline, following the collapse of her grand ambitions. "Please, Mom," she implored, her voice heavy with unspoken sorrow. "I need your assistance. I find myself without any other options." Clara looked at her with a blend of disgust and sympathy, her impeccably painted lips twisting into a scornful smile. "How can I assist you?" She let out a harsh laugh, the sound tinged with bitterness. Following the grand display you put on for everyone? Regarding our family? Marissa flinched, her eyes growing wide with shock. But you are my mother. You should always be in my corner. Regardless of the situation. What about your perspective? Clara gently shook her head. A subtle gesture of disbelief. Can't you understand, you naive girl? There are no longer any sides. You've severed all connections. Estranged those who once held you dear with your insatiable desire and deceit. Her words pierced through the air, each syllable a keen edge carving into the delicate fragments of Marissa's self-esteem. I witnessed the precise instant when the truth settled in, when the weight of her solitude became unbearable. And you? You can't mean that, she whispered, her hand trembling as she reached out. Mother? Kindly? Yet Clara simply retreated, her face transforming into a facade of icy detachment. I don't know who you are anymore, she said, her voice devoid of emotion. The daughter I nurtured would never have sunk to such reprehensible depths. You've created your own situation, Marissa. Now you can rest in it. By yourself. With those final, scathing words, she turned and vanished back into the house, leaving Marissa on the doorstep, a shattered, broken figure. In the weeks that followed, I observed how the once proud, yet entitled young woman was gradually worn down by the burden of her own choices. The familiar places she once loved, the fashionable bars and elegant shops, now looked upon her with barely concealed contempt. Murmurs and sharp glances following her as she passed. Even those she considered friends turned their backs on her, reluctant to be linked to such a scandalous situation. Amidst the turmoil, Ron and I remained steadfast. Our connection deepened in the fire of her treachery. Regret hung in the air as he whispered one evening, watching Marissa glide by, her gaze lowered in embarrassment. Indeed, you were correct from the very beginning. She is the architect of her own misfortune. I remained silent, simply offering his hand a soft squeeze. The language felt insufficient when confronted with such a harsh truth. As the dust settled and our community started to mend from the shockwaves of Marissa's deceit, Ron and I found ourselves embraced by a wave of support and appreciation. The families we had assisted, the students whose paths I had influenced, they all came together for us, expressing gratitude for confronting the manipulation and deceit that almost drove us apart. In those moments of connection, witnessing the profound depths of human kindness and resilience, I discovered a sense of peace and purpose that had been desperately absent during the darkest days of Marissa's reign of terror. She aimed to obliterate me, to diminish my existence to nothing more than a trivial detail in the elaborate story she had woven for her own purposes. Ultimately, it was her own selfish desires that led to her downfall, peeling back the layers of deception to expose the distorted, empty shell within. Ron and I would persevere, emerging from the experience with greater strength and wisdom. Should our narrative serve as a beacon for others to resist manipulation and deceit, to hold fast to honesty and integrity above all, then perhaps some good may yet emerge from the ruins of Marissa's broken dreams.